Good morning from Washington. I'm Dana Bash. Chaos in Congress. Now, most of you are unfortunately so used to hearing that you're probably rolling your eyes right about now, but the drama I watched unfold in the Capitol on Friday night was different. House Republican leaders were blindsided when their plan to prevent the Department of Homeland Security from shutting down was defeated. 52 conservatives voted no because the funding bill didn't also stop the president's immigration plan. But in the end, a bill did pass to fund the Homeland Security Department for 1 week, which means, once again, in just a few days, we're going to be facing another shutdown. Now, I was reporting from the Capitol Friday night and had exasperated veteran Republican lawmakers say things to me like, how are we supposed to govern? They were at a loss with how to control their own right flank at a time when American security couldn't be more important. Joining me now is conservative from that right flank. At the heart of all of this, Republican Congressman Jim Jordan, who is the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus, formed earlier this year to advocate for conservative legislation. Congressman, thank you very much for joining me. I just want to ask the first question that everybody out there is probably asking, probably in disgust, saying, really, what is wrong with Congress? Why can't you govern? And why can't you fund a government agency that keeps us safe?
No, we do want to fund that agency. We understand how serious the terrorist threat is out there. We passed a bill at the levels that the Democrat wanted. What we did say was, we don't want to fund something that everyone knows is unconstitutional. Legal scholars on the right and the left have said it's unconstitutional, and a federal judge has said is unlawful. That's the bill we sent there. Fund it at the levels the Democrats want, but don't do something that's unconstitutional.
Right, but you know basic civics because you are a member of Congress. The Senate can't pass that. It can't get past the Senate.
Dana, so basic civics, we sent a bill over there 6 weeks ago that did what I just described. Funded at the Democrats' levels, but said we're not going to allow dollars to be used for something we all know is unconstitutional. And the Democrats said, and the Senate said for 6 weeks, oh, we can't bring it up, we can't debate it, we can't amend it, we can't pass it. And then guess what happened? The very last day, they brought up the bill, they debated it, they amended it, they passed it. And now all we're saying is, let's go to conference committee. You passed government class in high school, I did too, and we know how it works. We pass something, they pass something, you go sit around a table just like this, a nice round table, and you work out the differences. What's wrong with that process? That's how it's supposed to work.
It is how it's supposed to work, but in the reality that you are dealing with right now, there still are not enough votes in the Senate, filibuster-proof votes, okay? You know this. You've heard this from your leadership. I don't want to get too far into the weeds here before we move on from this, but there is no plan over that hump, that very important hump, which is why there is such a stalemate. This is why your fellow conservatives in the Senate, Ted Cruz, Jeff Sessions, they allowed a bill to pass, a clean bill to fund the Department of Homeland Security, no strings, because they know the political reality. Why don't you?
Dan, you're making our point. That's why you have to let the process work and go to conference. That's where you iron out these differences. Remember, Harry Reid said he wasn't going to pass anything except a DHS bill that funded it for the whole year. And what did they do? They accepted a 1 week short-term spending bill. That gives us time to go to conference. Let's go to conference. Let's work it out. Remember, this underlying action, what caused all this is when the president last November did something that 22 times before he said he wouldn't do, then he turned around and did it. Legal scholars say it's unconstitutional. We know it's unconstitutional, and the only court to rule on this, the federal court in Texas, said what he did was wrong. And for the Democrats to insist upon being able to still spend money for something everyone knows is unconstitutional, the president said he wouldn't do, and a federal judge has ruled is wrong, that's the problem. Okay, but we're even willing. In spite of all that, we're willing to sit down and try to work out the differences. That's all the House has asked for. That's all we conservatives wanted when we went to our leadership and presented, let's go to conference. Make sure we go to conference, and we'll be for it.
Let me read something that your fellow Republican in the House, Congressman Devin Nunes of California, said in a statement that they put out yesterday. He said, I prefer to be in an arena voting than trying to placate a small group of phony conservative members who have no credible policy proposals and no political strategy to stop Obama's lawlessness. Yeah. He's talking about you, calling you a phony conservative and saying you have no policy to get around.
Look, I'm not going to. I don't call, say things about my colleagues. What I do know is this: last November there was an election. This was an important issue in that election. The voters spoke loud and clear. They gave us an overwhelming majority in the House of Representatives. They gave the United States Senate to a majority to the Republican Party as well. And we know this is unconstitutional. And beyond that, it's not just that it's unconstitutional. It's a bad idea what the president did because it's unfair.
But a lot of people, but I'm going to say, you're not saying anything that the House Republican leadership, they agree with you on this, but they're also living in the reality of the process in that they can't do anything about it because they don't have the votes ultimately to do it without shutting down the Department of Homeland Security.
We need to make the case. We haven't made the case strong enough. We know that this is unconstitutional and we know it's unfair. Now think about this. What the president did. How is it fair to citizens that if you let non-citizens illegals go back and get tax refunds for the last 3 years, as Commissioner Koskinen has testified under oath? How is it fair to seniors if you let non-citizens illegals participate in our Social Security system? How is it fair to voters? Our Secretary of State, under oath, came and testified in Congress and said now non-citizen illegals are going to have a potential now to be involved in our election process, actually vote. And most importantly, Dana, how is it fair? What the president did, how is it fair to those legal immigrants who did it the right way, who followed the law? How is it fair to them?
Okay, you've made that point, and I understand that you obviously feel very passionately about this, but this is also about passion and principle versus governing. And it just, from people looking in from the outside, and even more importantly, your fellow Republican colleagues think that you are more interested in chaos and sticking to principle than your responsibility of governing.
We're most interested in adhering to the principles that are consistent with the Constitution. We're most interested in doing what the voters elected us to do in November. You don't think this was a big issue in the election last November? Of course it was. This was taking on the president's unconstitutional executive amnesty actions was a huge issue in the election, and the voters spoke overwhelmingly. And all we're asking now for Harry Reid to do, all we're asking for him to do, is follow the process.
Have you been in any conversations about trying to get rid of House Speaker John Boehner?
No, that's not the point.
No, have you?
No, of course
yes
not.
Or no?
No, that's not the point. The point is to do what we told the voters we were going to do, and to do it in a way that's consistent with the United States Constitution, consistent with fundamental fairness, and consistent with the only court to rule on this. The only court to rule. Do it in a way that's consistent with the federal judge's decision.
If the House Speaker ends up at the end of next week allowing a vote on the House floor to fully fund the Department of Homeland Security without addressing the president's immigration plan, will you challenge the House Speaker?
No, of course not. I don't think that's going to happen, though. I think we have to make the case, continue to make the case. Harry Reid, we're not going to bring the bill up. We can't debate it. We can't amend it. We can't vote on it. And what did they do? They actually, in the end, brought up the bill. They amended it. They debated it. And they voted on it. Now, they did it at the 11th hour, and that's the problem. So we need time to get to conference and do the right thing.
If your colleagues, if your conservative colleagues come to you and say, we want to try to make a play, we're done with this leadership team, we want to try to make a play to get rid of them. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You're saying affirmatively it's not going to happen.
That is not the issue. The issue is, I keep coming back to, we had an election last November. We have a federal judge who said this is wrong. We have legal scholars, people like Jonathan Turley on the left, who say what the president did, the magnitude, 5 million people, that is wrong, that is unconstitutional. So for those reasons, we need to get to conference and make sure language that's close to what we pass in the House is the final product.
Okay, let me ask, you've talked so much about it being unconstitutional what the president did in his executive action. So, given that, you also have another tool that the Constitution gives you, and that is to file articles of impeachment. If you think that what the president did was so unconstitutional, why not make moves to impeach him?
We're not going to do that either. Look, we're focused on this legislation, funding the department at the levels the Democrats wanted, the levels they agreed to, and making sure, why did the Democrats insist, and this is amazing to me, why do they insist on being able to fund something that we know is constitutional and a federal judge has ruled against? That's the fundamental question. They insist upon having that ability, even though the only court to speak on it says you can't do it and it is wrong. That makes so much sense. That's why our bill makes so much common sense. I'm just frustrated that Harry Reid continues to take the position he does.
One last question. Do you want the House Republican leadership to succeed or not?
Of course we want them to succeed, because that helps the country succeed. That's good for the families we represent.
The country certainly doesn't look like it. I mean, I've covered Congress for a very long time, and it feels more chaotic, and it is impossible at this point for the House Speaker and the leadership team to govern, and they feel like it is because you all don't take yes for an answer.
What's best for the country is to fund the Homeland Security Department, but do it in a way consistent with the Constitution. That's what the election was about. Last time I checked, Republicans did pretty well in the election last November. We're supposed to actually, politicians when they get elected are actually supposed to do what they told the voters they were going to do when they got the job.
Okay. Thank you very much for this spirited discussion. I appreciate it. We'll be watching all next week to see what happens. Thank you very much. And when we